You go, if you think of the first ray, for instance, Moya's job, you have to think in terms of uh, nations. And you have to think, for instance, there's a little book by Bailey called The Destiny of the Nations, and you can read that book to get an idea of the fact that nations, from our perspective, are viewed as similar as human beings, as they have ray lines, sub-rays, they are born and eventually they will die. And that's a certainty for all the nations. They have national interrelationships with other nations. They have their family squabbles. They produce a lot of karma, especially the rapacious ones. And the karma that they produce then will come back later on to affect the nation. And so those of us that think of the planet from a more esoteric viewpoint, look at this from that perspective. And the nations also have a masculine and feminine polarity. Some, for instance, like France, they think of being feminine. There's Marianne, which is the symbol of France, coming from the revolutionary times. It wears that little cap. You'll see it often in the stamps of France. And you know, America is divided. It's the north-south divide of one half is masculine, the other half is feminine. And so there's that male and female that just don't get on very well. And they had a civil war to point that out. So it's, you know, I don't know, I don't think in terms of being Turkish, but our Turkish brethren there can probably tell us what they think gender their particular country is, male or female. If we go back to, say, America with that north-south divide, which was quite obvious at the time of the American Civil War, where the Southerners were first ray and they were into their slaves, agriculturally sort of focused, and the Northerners were industrial base. They had the railways and all the rest of it. So the unionized. So that type of distinct difference in the national way of thinking is quite was quite distinct there. As you just said, there's a distinction between two parts of Turkey. So there's a what you might call brother and sister, or husband and wife in Turkey that are trying to live together, and there's many countries that have that type of distinction within the country. And so there's this real rivalry or squabbles or a complete difference of political views between one part of the nation and another. And so you got that male female or Ida Pingala aspect. Now, some nations are quite young and boisterous. They're full of hubris. They're aggressive. Other nations are much older and they're mellow. They should be wiser as a nation. Now, for instance, you get America, and it's a relatively young country, not as young as my country here in Australia, though I'm European by extract. It's a relatively young country. It's the daughter and brother, if you want, of Europe. And they should be telling America and educating America the way to think, the way to behave, and all the rest of it. Instead, you get this brash, bully teenager. Well, it's not a teenager, he's about 21, 22 now, very aggressive and boorish and all the rest of it, telling Europe, which should be cultured and all the rest of it, what to do, how to behave, how to think, and Europe is cowered by this bully that's America. So you see what I'm trying to get at, and this is sort of a difficult sort of talk, from a first ray perspective. Someone like Moya has to look at the national identities of the various countries and try to educate them so as, for instance, not to be a bully, for the Europeans to be more cultured, to be wiser, not to be coward, and all the various national identities and how they interrelate. And what you normally get when you're looking at this type of worldview, therefore, is also a history of war. There's warring sides, sort of, most of you, if you can imagine the way that the countries have moved from, say, the First World War to the Second World War, before the First World War, there was a completely different national identity in Europe. For instance, Austria-Hungary was one country. Now it's 2 or 3 or 4. It's the Ottoman Empire was, they were called the weak man of Europe. Was much larger then. If you go back a century or two, it was expanded. So you get these shifting borders between the countries based on war, but within that, you also get cultural exchanges, religious exchanges, sort of mass movements of thought, of energies and energy fields that produces what you might call the nadis of the earth. And so somebody like Moya has to look at that entire interrelationship of the moving countries and say, now, which way are these countries and their total interrelationship are to move towards in the future to make a better world? See, it's adjusting political thinking. And when you get into political thinking, then you're talking also about the way the Dark Brotherhood is influencing the leaders of the world. And then cosmic DB and all the rest of that from an inner perspective comes into view. So you can begin to get a better idea. And then from that, what I'm talking about here is what in the esoteric books is called the Manu's department. The Manu is the Lord of life. And so he's dealing with streams of life and lives that moving in to and out of countries to produce the various effects. Now, somebody like Moya, so for instance, we all believe in reincarnation, rebirth. We know that this is not the first life we've had. And so what you're doing, or somebody like Moya is meditating upon what? He's meditating upon, for instance, the movement of groups of souls, for instance, in, say, Nazi Germany or in Stalinist Russia, incarnating into America, and then producing the present neocon civilization there, that attitude that's aggressive and boorish and all the rest of it, that wants to control and conquer the world, what we call the hegemon. So you see the movement. So it's the same consciousness, those samskaras, the nadis that were formerly incarnate in one part of the world and sort of marching in, say, goose step and saying Hail Hitler, those individuals en masse moving into another country, a life into the future. And then what's the next step? Where's the next step they'll take? And the next step and the next step of that whole mass of people, that life stream, right? And so this is, in a sense, the Manu's department is trying to direct those streams of lives, of human lives, into a position where they fix up their karma. It's all got to do with karma, and and then we're going to the subject of the lipikas, or lords of karma. And so the first-rate department is specifically working with the lords of karma and directing the karma of that mass movement of people. And with the people come animals and plants and other streams of life. Of course, this particular vast scale of thinking is also a little bit beyond Moya's level. He's working with the Buddhas of activity and the lords of Shambhala, who think on this vast scale. But you get an idea that all this then comes within the first-rate department. And we can think, give the labels, politics, law, life, will, all of these things. War is the first-rate department, but it's it's a vaster scale, because you're looking at the way that mass movements go, and you're dealing with death, life, death, wars, and all the rest of it. So those that have evolved along the first-rate line, which is very difficult for most initiates or on the spiritual path to understand a first-rate warrior, a disciple on the first-rate, because they deal with militaristic matters. They often have a cruel streak in them. They're not 100% loving, as all of you are, because they have this energy, this force, this will energy that's manifesting through them, and it produces exaggerations. And they've had these lives of being a soldier or politician over and over again, and not very good at understanding the fine points of love, because they know how to command and to will, and people obey. They're used to having people obey their dictates and things like that. So the ego comes into play and all the rest of it. Like Ataturk, who was basically the founder of modern Turkey, he is along this type of ray, and he's a disciple, an initiate of, and DK mentions him, and a minor avatar, and he comes through war, and is a military general, and most of us know of his rise from the Gallipoli sort of campaign onwards. But so you're thinking of people that have done a lot of killing and all the rest of that. They don't have a lot of nice things in their cupboard, but at the same time, they direct nations in a correct way. When they come into power, they produce a positive effect for millions and millions of people. And then they become a focal point of a national identity, which the entire nation then identifies around. And then that is the type of first-rate disciple. So it's not what you normally think of as a really spiritual being. They have spirituality, yes, but it's not their main thing. Their main thing is producing positive results, normally from a nationalistic point of view, for the country that they have incarnated into. Hitler can be also considered a similar sort of thing for the German people at that time.